An unsettling question echoes through the ages. Why do so many sacred artifacts, objects of supposed divinity, cry out for blood? It's a demand that permeates ancient lore and whispers through hushed ceremonies even today. We'll begin this journey by tracing the silent pact embedded within the very fabric of Christian communion. Consider the bread, the wine, the representation of body and blood. It's a profound offering, but what is truly being consumed and by whom? We'll then lift the veil on a mythological entity, a being of immense power that existed long before the emergence of the cross itself. This primal force is intimately connected to the demand for lifeblood. Our exploration will venture into the shadowed depths of Gnostic scriptures, the hushed halls of Vatican vaults, and the ancient pre-Abrahamic rites. These forgotten narratives will reveal how a powerful, ancient being was seemingly bound beneath the foundations of churches, all carefully masked under the benevolent guise of eternal salvation. By the end of this initial dive, you will start to perceive the cross not as a symbol of divine protection, but as an intricate sigil representing an eternal, inescapable debt, a cosmic transaction sealed in crimson. The journey ahead will unveil a hidden blood pact, a cosmic agreement that underpins many of our most revered spiritual traditions. We'll peel back the layers of symbolism to reveal the unsettling truth behind the rituals that have shaped human consciousness for millennia. But first, we must acknowledge that the insights we're about to uncover demand a conscious engagement. And real quick, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos. Now let's keep going. We've opened the door to a chilling question about the demand for blood in sacred rites. This isn't mere superstition, it's a foundational element of an ancient transaction. The symbolism of blood is universal, representing life, sacrifice, and an undeniable connection to the spiritual realm. But what if this connection has been deliberately engineered, designed to channel life force toward specific entities rather than toward true liberation? We will delve into how this primal energy, symbolized by blood, became the currency of a spiritual economy, a debt inscribed not in ledgers, but in the very essence of our being. This debt, this pact, is not a singular event, but a recurring cycle, a pattern woven into the spiritual architecture of our world. It's a contract that requires constant renewal, a spiritual standing order that ensures the perpetuation of a specific cosmological arrangement. Understanding this hidden pact is the first step toward recognizing the true nature of the divine and the not-so-divine forces that have influenced humanity's spiritual trajectory. We must look beyond the comforting narratives we've been given and confront the unsettling implications of this ancient, blood-sealed agreement. And in this next section, we'll begin to decode the inverted cross, a symbol often misunderstood but profoundly representative of this ancient pact. The inverted cross, a symbol often seen as a perversion or an outright negation of Christian faith, holds a far deeper and more complex meaning than superficial interpretations allow. It is not simply an act of defiance, but a key, a cipher that unlocks a hidden layer of spiritual engineering. This symbol, when understood in its original context, reveals a reversal of sacred energies, a deliberate inversion of natural spiritual flows. It speaks to a system that operates by manipulating divine principles, turning them upon themselves. We must understand that symbols are not static, they are living conduits of energy and intent. The inverted cross, in this light, becomes a lens through which we can perceive a powerful, ancient force that has been subtly working to redirect human spiritual evolution. It's a signal, a marker of a broken covenant, a system designed to harvest rather than to heal. Its presence in various spiritual and occult traditions is no accident. It is a consistent indicator of a specific, powerful influence at play, one that seeks to bind and control rather than liberate. This code, woven into the fabric of seemingly disparate traditions, points to a unified intelligence and a singular purpose. To truly grasp the nature of this pact, we must next examine how a central Christian ritual, communion, reflects this very principle of inversion. Communion, that central act of Christian worship, is profoundly more than just a symbolic remembrance. It is a ritual of feeding, a sacred act that, when examined with a critical eye, reveals a deeper, almost unsettling purpose. The consecrated bread and wine, representing the body and blood of Christ, are consumed, creating an intimate union between the worshipper and the divine. But what if this union is not with the benevolent Creator we are led to believe? What if this devotional act is, in fact, a sophisticated mechanism for spiritual sustenance, for something else entirely? This ritual taps into primal needs and spiritual hunger, the desire for connection, for forgiveness, for a tangible sense of the divine presence, makes participants willingly engage in this act of symbolic consumption. It's a masterstroke of spiritual engineering, leveraging humanity's deepest yearnings to create a continuous loop of energy transfer. The act itself is designed to foster a sense of belonging and spiritual fulfillment, masking the underlying extraction that occurs with every sip and every bite. We must question the true beneficiary of this constant offering. The energy exchanged during communion is potent, and understanding its intended recipient is critical to unraveling the entire system. This leads us to a crucial warning, a desperate plea from an ancient wisdom tradition that sought to illuminate this very deception. The Gnostic scriptures whisper of entities known as archons, beings that exist outside the natural flow of creation, acting as jailers in a cosmic prison. They are described as parasitic intelligences, manipulators of perception who seek to keep humanity ensnared in ignorance and material illusion. These texts are not mere philosophical musings. They are ancient warnings, born from profound spiritual insight into the nature of our reality. The archons are said to feed on our fear, our confusion, and our spiritual energy, thriving on our unwitting participation in their system. Their influence is subtle, insidious, and pervasive, woven into the very fabric of our societal structures and belief systems. They create a false reality, a comforting illusion that prevents us from remembering our true divine nature and our inherent freedom. The Gnostics understood that our spiritual awakening was a direct threat to their dominion, and thus, they devised methods to obscure the path to true knowledge, deliberately distorting spiritual truths and creating labyrinthine doctrines. It's a war fought on the battlefield of consciousness, and their primary weapon is deception. This Gnostic warning is vital because it directly addresses the veiled powers that have shaped human spiritual development. It offers a framework for understanding the forces that might be behind the blood pacts and feeding rituals we've begun to uncover. But to fully comprehend their agenda, we must ask ourselves, who or what occupied this spiritual landscape before the figures we now revere? Before Jesus walked the earth, before Abraham looked to the heavens, countless spiritual traditions and mythologies flourished, each with its own pantheon and cosmology. Yet a persistent undercurrent in many ancient texts, including the Gnostic writings and even pre-Christian European mythologies, speaks of a primal deity, a being that predates the Abrahamic God and the figures we now recognize as central to Western spirituality. This vanished God was often associated with the earth, with cycles of nature, and perhaps with a more direct, untamed spiritual power. The silence surrounding these older deities, their gradual erasure from mainstream religious narratives, is not accidental. It signals a deliberate restructuring of the divine, a purposeful rewriting of spiritual history. These older forces, with their earthbound connections and perhaps less hierarchical structures, represented a form of spirituality that did not fit the emerging paradigm. Their disappearance from popular consciousness allowed for the narrative of a singular, transcendent God to take root, a narrative that conveniently paved the way for other, more subtle influences to assert their dominance. The question of who was here before is not merely academic. It's about understanding the original spiritual blueprint of this planet and recognizing what might have been suppressed or overwritten. This leads directly to the mystery of what lies beneath Golgotha, the very site where the symbol of salvation was erected, and what ancient power might have been buried there. Beneath the hill of Golgotha, the very ground where the cross stands as a symbol of redemption, lies a potent secret, a forgotten power that was deliberately obscured. Ancient traditions hinted at a slumbering entity, a primal force bound beneath the place of Christ's crucifixion. This wasn't merely a symbolic interment, it was an act of containment, a spiritual sealing of something immense and potentially volatile. The narrative of the crucifixion, while offering salvation to believers, simultaneously served a secondary purpose: to anchor and suppress this older, earthbound divinity. The act of binding this ancient being was crucial for the establishment of a new spiritual order. It allowed for a redistribution of spiritual authority, replacing the old, perhaps more chaotic energies with a controlled, hierarchical system. The very site of the crucifixion became a focal point, a nexus where the old power was neutralized and the new narrative cemented. This sealing was not a benevolent act of protection, but an act of strategic spiritual warfare designed to claim dominion over the very soul of the planet. The seal placed upon this entity is intricate, a complex interplay of symbols and energies designed to maintain its confinement. This leads us to understand the cross itself, not just as a symbol of faith, but as a powerful sigil that perpetuates this binding, creating a vast egoic trap that has ensnared humanity for centuries. The cross, as a symbol, functions on multiple levels, far beyond its theological interpretations. It is a powerful sigil, an energy diagram meticulously designed to create a specific effect within the spiritual ecosystem. This sigil isn't just about pointing upwards to the divine. It is intricately linked to a broader pattern, a geometric architecture that underpins much of our spiritual infrastructure, particularly the design of churches. These sacred spaces are not random collections of stone and timber, they are intentional constructs, echoing a cosmic blueprint. The alignment, the dimensions, the very layout of churches often reflect a profound understanding of sacred geometry and planetary energies. This geometry is not merely aesthetic, it is functional, channeling and directing specific spiritual forces. The intersection of lines, the placement of altars, the very orientation of the building often serves to reinforce the egoic trap, that self-perpetuating system of belief and energy extraction we've begun to uncover. The church, in this context, becomes less a house of worship and more a carefully calibrated machine. This deliberate geometric design acts as an amplifier and a conductor for the egoic field, solidifying the trap and ensuring its continuity across generations. To understand why this trap is so effective, we must delve into the fundamental element that fuels it, the very essence that makes such a system sustainable. The demand for blood in sacred and occult practices is not a random quirk or a barbaric relic of the past. It is a fundamental requirement, an indispensable component of the spiritual economy we are uncovering. Blood, as the carrier of life force, the amplifier of intent, and the most potent energetic signature of a living being, serves as the ultimate offering. It is the energy that fuels the cycle, the currency that is exchanged in these ancient transactions. Without it, the system we've begun to see would falter and cease to be sustained. This demand isn't limited to dramatic sacrifices in ancient times. It persists in subtler, yet equally potent, forms within modern rituals and belief systems. The energetic exchange, the continuous siphoning of vital essence, requires a constant replenishment. Whether it is offered consciously through sacrifice or unconsciously through devotion, prayer, and emotional investment, our life force is the fuel. The entities and systems that rely on this energy have ensured that the demand for blood, in its various symbolic and literal forms, remains a non-negotiable aspect of their perpetuation. So why this unwavering insistence on blood across so many varied traditions? The answer lies in the profound energetic implications of life itself and the entities that have learned to harness it. This leads us to the repositories of such hidden knowledge. Within the hallowed halls and carefully guarded vaults of the Vatican lie not only religious artifacts, but also meticulously preserved records of a millennia-old spiritual administration. These archives contain documents that speak of pacts, bindings, and the management of an ancient, powerful entity that was strategically neutralized and contained. The Vatican's immense wealth and influence are rooted in its custodianship of this spiritual secret, a secret that involves the systematic suppression and redirection of fundamental cosmic energies. These records detail the ongoing efforts to maintain the containment of this primal being, ensuring its influence remains tethered and controlled. They are the operational manuals of a spiritual syndicate, outlining the methods used to perpetuate the illusion of salvation while subtly harvesting generational spiritual energy. The hierarchy within such an institution is not just about ecclesiastical power, it is about stewardship of a cosmic control system. Understanding these archives is key to understanding how a primal, earth-aligned force was deliberately Christianized, effectively becoming a prisoner within its own converted temple systems. What we are seeing within these Vatican archives is the operational blueprint of a spiritual empire built on containment and control, a system that has deeply influenced global consciousness. This deliberate containment of a pagan god, stripping it of its power and reassigning its attributes, leads us to explore the very nature of its Christian guise. The figure we now associate with Christianity, the revered Nazarene, can be seen as a profound repackaging of an older, earthward-reaching deity. This pagan god, stripped of their original identity and iconography, was systematically redressed in the robes of a new spiritual narrative. The essence of this ancient being, its connection to the fertile earth and the cycles of life and death, was subtly incorporated into the new doctrine, but altered, its raw power domesticated and channeled into a more controlled, hierarchical system. This artistic and mythological appropriation was a strategic move. By absorbing and reinterpreting the core elements of pre-existing spiritual traditions, the new religion could gain traction and displace older beliefs without completely obliterating their energetic resonance. It was a form of spiritual terraforming, where the land's original inhabitants were not expelled, but their spiritual essence was co-opted and repurposed to serve the new administration. The Christian deity became a benevolent mask for a more ancient, earthbound power now under new management. This act of dressing an old god in new garments is not merely symbolic. It has tangible, energetic consequences, particularly in relation to other powerful symbols of containment and control, such as the Black Cube. The Black Cube, an object of profound significance in various esoteric traditions and a prominent feature in certain religious constructions, resonates with themes of containment, limitation, and dense materiality. When juxtaposed with the rotating cross, a symbol of dynamic energy and spiritual redirection, we witness a stark representation of spiritual control. One anchors and binds, the other appears to offer movement, but has been co-opted to serve the very system it might have once opposed. This combination suggests a sophisticated mechanism for managing spiritual energy. The Black Cube represents the physical and energetic confines of our reality, a structured prison. The rotating cross, often seen in liturgical settings, can be interpreted as part of the mechanism that keeps this prison functional, perpetuating cycles of energy transfer and spiritual inertia. It's not about freedom of rotation, but about controlled, predictable movement within a predetermined framework. This synergy between static containment and perceived motion forms a critical part of the trapping mechanism. The deliberate engineering of these potent symbols, their integration into our most sacred spaces, highlights a consistent, overarching plan. This leads us to consider the visual elements of spiritual authority itself, specifically the attire worn by those who officiate. The ceremonial robes worn by religious figures, from ancient priestly garments to the elaborate vestments seen in many modern religious institutions, are far more than simple attire. They are tools designed to imbue the wearer with authority and to facilitate a specific transfer of spiritual energy. These garments are often imbued with symbolic meanings, woven with sigils, and made from specific materials intended to act as conduits or amplifiers for the spiritual forces they represent. They create a distinct energetic field around the wearer, setting them apart and elevating them as intermediaries. This transfer of authority is critical to the perpetuation of the established spiritual system. The robes act as a visible manifestation of a delegated power, a uniform that signifies membership within a specific spiritual hierarchy. They help to reinforce the belief that spiritual access and understanding are mediated, requiring the intercession of those who are properly cloaked. This visual cue, combined with the symbolic weight of the garments, is designed to impress upon the observer the legitimacy and sacredness of the officiant's role, perpetuating the illusion of a controlled spiritual gateway. Understanding the significance of these ritualistic garments further illuminates how spiritual systems are designed to manage access and power. But what happens when this carefully constructed system faces direct challenge? The act of exorcism, often portrayed as a dramatic battle against demonic forces, can be viewed through a different lens, as an elaborate deception designed to reinforce the very hierarchy it seems to dismantle. If we understand the primary entity being expelled as a dislodged fragment of the soul, a part of oneself that has become disconnected due to trauma, conditioning, or spiritual misalignment, then the exorcist becomes an agent of reabsorption rather than liberation. The ritual's intensity serves to ensure the fragments return to the established system, not to its true, unadulterated source. This performed expulsion solidifies the individual's dependence on external spiritual authorities and reinforces the idea that liberation comes from within an established dogma or through the intervention of a designated priest. The perceived victory of the exorcist is, in reality, a successful reassertion of control, a reintegration of a stray energetic component back into the larger, existing spiritual matrix. It's a method of psychological and spiritual pacification, ensuring that the individual remains within the fold, their energetic potential still subject to the prevailing system of debt and extraction. This complex interplay of control and perceived liberation reveals an even more profound truth about the nature of what is offered to humanity as a path to freedom. Salvation, as it is commonly understood and offered within many spiritual frameworks, functions not as a gift of true liberation, but as a sophisticated debt mechanism. The promise of an afterlife free from suffering, of eternal peace and divine union, is presented as the ultimate reward for adherence to specific doctrines and prescribed rituals. However, this promise is conditional, requiring a continuous offering of devotion, belief, and energetic adherence. It's a cosmic loan where the perceived interest is paid throughout one's life through obedience and energetic channeling. When we examine the cyclical nature of spiritual systems and the persistent demand for life force, salvation appears less like a release and more like an entry into a different, perhaps more subtle, form of servitude. The terms of this salvation are dictated by the architects of the system, ensuring that the soul remains bound, its ultimate freedom postponed or perpetually deferred. It's a perpetual payment plan where the true price of salvation is not redemption, but ongoing energetic contribution to the existing cosmic structure, a structure designed for perpetual extraction. The realization that salvation is, in fact, a perpetual debt sheds light on the urgency of our current spiritual moment. It compels us to consider the possibility of a different path, one that lies beyond the confines of these ancient traps. This leads us to the final, crucial step, the awakening. The edifice of spiritual debt, the intricate architecture of control we have begun to dismantle, rests upon a foundation of unwitting participation. The awakening is not merely an intellectual understanding. It is a profound shift in consciousness, a visceral recognition of the illusory nature of the system designed to enslave us. It is the moment we cease to accept the terms of our spiritual subjugation, the moment we refuse to honor a debt that was never rightfully ours. This refusal is the ultimate act of sovereignty, a reclaiming of our inherent divine right. To awaken is to step out of the programmed cycles, to silence the echoes of ancient pacts sealed in blood and fear. It is to understand that true freedom is not granted, but remembered. It requires us to dismantle the internal architectures of belief that have been meticulously constructed by external forces, to see through the deception of prescribed salvation and recognize the true nature of our interconnectedness, unbound by imposed limitations. This is the path to true liberation, the rejection of the ritual that binds us. And as we stand on the precipice of this profound awakening, understanding the mechanisms of the trap allows us to truly break free. Make sure to subscribe for more videos and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new video. We'll see you in the next one.